My respects, dear guest. The mere fact that you're watching already makes me happy, but your subscription will send my joy to the heavens. Get ready, we're taking off. My therapist encouraged me to document everything that had happened, believing I was harboring too much resentment without finding any healthy outlet for it. According to her, I've kept everything bottled up, and until I acknowledge it or find peace with it, I'll remain stuck in this limbo. She thinks I'm paralyzed by a need for closure that may never come, and as long as I refuse to let go, I won't move forward. In her words, if I can shift my perspective and give voice to what I've been carrying, I might finally start the process of reconnecting with who I used to be. But who was that exactly? Honestly, I'm not sure anymore. Apparently, that's part of the issue. My name is Robert Benson. At the time I'm writing this, I'm 34 years old. I worked in middle management at an engineering company. We specialized in custom machinery, designing, constructing, and delivering unique equipment to our clients. I understood early on that moving up wasn't really an option for me, since it was a family-owned business, and I wasn't part of the family. But what unfolded later made it impossible to remain there at all. People used to tell me I was one of the decent ones. I liked to joke around, at least before things went wrong. I've always believed in working hard, being dependable, and looking out for those around me. I took pride in fulfilling obligations, both at work and in my personal life. Commitments like marriage meant something to me. Looking back, maybe they didn't mean as much to everyone else. Let me take you back. During high school, I was slightly above average, not top of the class, but consistent. I wasn't naturally brilliant, but I put in the effort and earned decent grades. Occasionally, I'd get into fights if someone pushed me too far, but I let things go once the dust settled. I had a small circle of close friends, guys who had my back no matter what. I wasn't exactly turning heads, so women didn't flock to me, but those who got to know me generally liked me. I grew up with the belief that respect, especially toward women, wasn't optional. If a woman said no, I listened and walked away. I ended up leaving high school before finishing, opting instead to work and study simultaneously. I joined the company as a trainee, attending a community college part-time to learn engineering. Even as a kid, I loved assembling things. First with Duplo and Lego, then moving on to Meccano sets. Now, I get to design machines using computer software, adult versions of the toys I adored. My friends often joke that I never stopped loving gadgets. I once wore a discreet body camera, styled like a lapel pin, to a night out that I thought would be memorable. That device turned out to be more than a souvenir. It became a lifeline. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At the end of my first year of college, there was a huge party, a celebration of the coming summer break. My buddy Bill had his eye on a nursing student who used some of the college and hospital resources, and he convinced me to go with him. He figured if I tagged along, maybe her friends would take an interest in me, though I doubted nursing students would be into someone from engineering instead of medical school. I suppose I'm fairly average in appearance, normal height, decent shape thanks to my physically demanding job. I agreed to go mostly because there was a live band playing. Bill's friend Stephanie introduced us to a group of girls. I was friendly and polite, complimenting them, sincerely, because they were all stunning. One of them, a girl named Carol, struck up a conversation with me. We had a couple of drinks, danced a bit. Surprisingly, I didn't ruin her toes in the process, which was a win for someone with my lack of rhythm. She laughed at my jokes, even the ones that probably crossed a line. Carol was beautiful, about 5'5", slim build, and I found her charming in every way. By the end of the night, she asked if I wanted to see her again. I said yes, of course. Who wouldn't? Looking back now, I guess I should have said no. But at the time, I felt lucky. We started dating, and soon my feelings for her were overwhelming, the kind I'd only experienced once before. I had cared for girls in the past, but Carol had this effect on me that I couldn't explain. When we weren't together, I missed her terribly. My parents teased me about it, but in a warm, supportive way. They saw that she made me happy. Her presence motivated me to apply myself even harder in school. I wanted to be someone she could look up to, someone she might love. We talked about the future often. Carol's goal was to become a registered nurse, and she believed that motherhood would get in the way. I told her how much I loved the idea of having kids, and that becoming a mother wouldn't limit her. If anything, it could enrich her perspective and enhance her ability to care for patients. We had long, honest discussions about it, but she was firm in her belief. Eventually, I spoke to my parents, who encouraged me to listen to my heart. My mother adored Carol, treated her like the daughter she never had. My brother Dan already had one child and another on the way, so my parents weren't desperate for more grandchildren. Carol was also close with her sister Carrie, and thanks to Carol's night shifts, she often had blocks of time off, 5 to 7 days at a stretch. A few times each year, she'd make the trip to Carrie's place. It was a 2-hour drive. She often told me I was so buried in work that I wouldn't even notice she was gone. That wasn't the case. I absolutely noticed. When she gave me the choice of marrying her without kids or walking away, I chose her. Nearly 3 years after we first crossed paths, June 16, 2009, we tied the knot. Bill stood beside me as my best man, and Stephanie, her closest friend, was maid of honor. They weren't a couple anymore. Stephanie had her heart set on marrying a doctor, something Bill often joked about since she left him chasing that goal. I couldn't really blame him for the teasing. Carol looked stunning that day, dressed in a flowing ivory satin gown. She smiled as she made her way toward me down the aisle. I tried not to break eye contact. There was probably a goofy grin stuck on my face the whole time, but I didn't care what our guests thought. After the wedding, Carol finally agreed to move into my house, something she'd refused to do before marriage. I'd bought the house from my grandparents once I started earning enough for a mortgage. It needed serious renovations, but I was good with my hands. By the time we got married, the place was mostly finished. A few upgrades were still on the list, though. Another disagreement surfaced shortly after the wedding, this time about finances. Carol insisted on keeping her own account so she wouldn't have to rely on me for her personal expenses. I kept mine, and we compromised by opening a shared account for bills, travel, and anything joint, contributing based on our individual incomes. I didn't win that argument either. Still, our early years together were solid, if not extraordinary. Carol's nursing school held regular reunions, and I managed to attend most of them. A couple conflicted with work trips, so I had to miss those. But even when I was there, I felt out of place, a tolerated outsider, almost like a clown. Stephanie always made an effort with me. She and Carol had been close for years. Carol tried to stay by my side during these events, but did share a few dances with other doctors. I didn't see anything inappropriate in those moments. Over time, I bonded with some of the husbands. Many were into golf, just like me. I got my handicap down to 6 and eventually joined them for friendly competitions. Some of those matches happened during reunions or when Carol had evening shifts. We'd also go on short golf trips now and then. Carol still visited her sister's place occasionally, which I quietly resented. She rarely brought up her work or long-term goals. She seemed content with being a regular nurse. If I asked, she'd say promotions meant more stress and less time with patients, something she didn't want. Most of our social life revolved around her circle of friends. I still met up with Bill and the others at our usual local spot for drinks. Sometimes Carol would join those gatherings. She was always cheerful around my non-medical friends, assuming her shifts allowed. With her, it was all about great food, music, and a taxi home. We enjoyed hikes through the hills, took weekend trips to Glasgow or Edinburgh for theater, and vacationed at places with beautiful beaches and local charm. Carol always wore modest swimwear. I'd try to convince her to wear something a bit more daring, but she always said no. She wouldn't even consider visiting a nude beach. We barely argued. If one of us disagreed with the other, we'd talk it through. Sometimes she'd give in, other times I would, but none of it ever affected our intimacy. In private, she was bold, loud, adventurous, even theatrical at times. We had no rules we wouldn't consider bending. Some experiences we enjoyed, others not so much. Still, I fell more in love with her with each passing day. As our 10th anniversary approached, I wanted to plan something memorable. I reached out to Stephanie to help organize a weekend away, dinner, and dancing. She was totally on board. She promised not to spill the surprise to Carol. Another couple we knew said the same. I knew I'd have to tell Carol eventually. If I waited too long, she'd try to take over the planning. When I finally told her a few days before, she was ecstatic. Getting out of bed the next morning was tough after her enthusiastic reaction. She rang up Stephanie right away, and before I knew it, we were all packed and off together. We dropped our bags at the hotel and met the others downstairs. Carol and Stephanie dove into an intense, emotional conversation. They were wrapped up in each other's lives and plans. Meanwhile, Brian and I chatted about the golf tournament we were hoping to enter. We had to stand our ground. Mark and Grant joked as they played, claiming their real-life work as doctors was already stressful enough without dragging rivalry into it. Later, we made our way to the hotel's nightclub. We picked a table tucked away in the rear, close enough to the bar and the lobby, but far enough from the booming speakers to hear ourselves talk. It was the perfect spot to unwind, chat between songs, and enjoy the vibe of the night. Carol made it clear to everyone that I was her only dance partner. The two of us were on the floor for most of the next hour and a half. Every so often, we'd stop for drinks. Just water for me, wine for her. Then we'd head right back to dancing. Then something changed. While we were in the middle of a song, I felt a hand tap my shoulder. As I turned around, I saw Carol already wrapped in another man's embrace, moving effortlessly with him. I didn't even get a chance to react, to say a word, to push back. I stood frozen. She looked elated. I'd never seen that expression on her face before. Not with me. He led with confidence, like the two of them had always belonged together. Numb, I walked back to our table. Stephanie was the first to speak, her amusement obvious. "Robert," she said, "how generous of you to let Carol dance with the man she's always loved. She actually invited him to your wedding, so he could step in and take her, but he never came." I stared at her in disbelief. Her lips smiled, but her eyes were ice-cold, full of contempt. And suddenly I knew that wasn't the whole story. Rage rose inside me. I couldn't hold it in. "What the hell is this?" I shouted. The table fell silent. Everyone except Stephanie avoided my gaze. "You've ruined my night," I continued louder. "She danced with no one but me, until now. You set this up, didn't you, Stephanie? You gave her time to plan this. You both knew who he was. What else has she been hiding?" My fury stunned them. I was still glaring at Stephanie, waiting, demanding an explanation, when Carol returned and tugged on my arm. She had clearly overheard everything. Others around us had too. She looked solemn. I already knew I wouldn't like what she was about to say. She led me into the hotel lobby. To say the night had turned from disappointing to catastrophic was an understatement. She looked me straight in the eye and spoke with calm resolve. "Robert," she said, "that man I danced with, his name is Bruce Benning. He's the only man I've ever truly loved." My breath caught. She continued. "We were together before I ever met you. We stayed in touch over the years, meeting a few times annually. He was training to become a pediatric neurosurgeon, and that path didn't leave room for us. He was happy for me when I found you. You've always been a good man, honest and kind. I enjoyed every moment with you, but my heart never stopped belonging to Bruce." She paused, then added, "He's the reason I couldn't bear to have children with you. I knew leaving you and taking them would have destroyed you. Now he's the head of neurosurgery in Leeds, and I'm going with him. I know this hurts, I truly am sorry. But during our time together, I gave you all of me, so you'd never feel second to anyone. If Bruce hadn't returned, I would have stayed your wife without complaint. Forever." I struggled to breathe. My vision swam. My head throbbed. My heart pounded violently. I stared at the woman I once believed had loved me. And then I vomited. So much for what was supposed to be a pleasant evening. Stephanie's smile was radiant, and the others were clearly amused by her. Then Benning came striding over. I looked at Carol and lost it. I screamed, "You lying, cheating, filthy whore! Take off those wedding and engagement rings right now, or I swear I'll tear them from your hand myself." Everyone froze. No one expected this side of me. It wasn't how I usually acted. But nothing about this situation was normal. It was staggering. Benning kept walking toward me. I faced him. "Come any closer and I'll make sure you never use your hands again, you bastard." He halted, taken aback, and glanced at the group like he hoped someone would defend him. "You think it's okay to screw around with my wife, ask her to publicly shame me, and the rest of you are just fine with it? You're even happy for them?" I turned to the group, fury pouring out of me. "You're all sewer scum. How many of you are sleeping around too? How many marriages have to be wrecked before it gets boring for you? You get off on watching lives fall apart?" I turned back to Carol, my rage honed to a single point. I roared, "Give me the damn rings, bitch!" I could feel the blood surging in my head, the veins near my temples bulging. My eyes locked onto hers, brimming with hatred. I had never been so consumed by rage. Part of me wanted to choke her until I felt her go limp. She looked terrified. That moment she understood she was truly in danger. She knew I wasn't bluffing. Still crying, she slid the rings off her fingers. I didn't care about her tears. I snatched the rings, turned around, and stormed to our room. I packed my bag in a fury, and when I saw her clothes neatly laid out, I didn't hesitate. I stuffed them into the garbage bin, then relieved myself on the whole pile. As I walked out, I tossed the key card at the front desk clerk. She'd seen the whole thing and muttered, "The slut can handle the charges." To this day, I still cringe that I never apologized for vomiting in the lobby. At least it wasn't on the carpet. There's no way I'll ever return there. I got in the car and drove home. My thoughts were racing in every direction. I have no memory of the drive itself. When I walked through the front door, some part of me settled. Not peace, not really, but enough of a pause to focus. I knew I had to do something. I went to the garage and disabled the automatic door. Who knew if she had another remote? I grabbed a box of trash bags and headed to the bedroom. I emptied her closet, dragging everything into a heap. Drawers came out next. I dumped everything into the bags. Under one drawer, 2 keys had been taped in place. One was for the home vault, the other for a safety deposit box. I rummaged through her jewelry box, took every piece I had ever bought for her, and shoved the whole thing in the trash bags. Then I went through our file cabinet, shaking out anything tied to her, personal files, bills, documents. I found a little notebook of hers with passwords inside. I scanned it for anything about Benning. Nothing. By then it was nearly 2 a.m. Sleep wasn't even an option. My pulse was still erratic, though not as explosive as before. She had a storage unit. I searched online to find the right one, 3 locations in town, all open 24/7. I found the correct facility. The website even displayed the type of key used, which matched one of hers. I pulled on latex gloves. No fingerprints. What I found inside crushed me. I thought I knew what pain felt like. I didn't. This wasn't pain. It was devastation. It tore through me, left me hollow, shredded. Back in the car, I grabbed the work camera I always keep on hand. I photographed everything, every box, every label. I documented it all, every last item. Inside were boxes of documents along with 2 locked cabinets. I picked the locks, a handy talent from engineering days. Part of me wishes I hadn't opened them. In one drawer, I came across Carol's hidden intentions. What I uncovered was almost too outrageous to believe. Who was this woman, really? Another folder held documents belonging to Benning. They only solidified my belief that he was utterly soulless and morally bankrupt, completely self-absorbed. His only true affection was reserved for his own reflection. I had to run back to the car to grab my phone battery. My camera had died. I double-checked that I'd captured every photo I needed. By the time I finished, the sun had already risen. It was 7 a.m. I locked the cabinet to make sure my presence wouldn't be detected. Then I headed to a nearby cafe for breakfast. While eating, I mentally reviewed all the damning information I'd uncovered. Carol's parents had pushed for a prenuptial agreement to safeguard her future. But from everything I had seen, Carol had no intention of settling for a simple 10% cut. Clearly, under Benning's manipulative influence, she wasn't just planning to leave me, she intended to destroy me completely. As much as I wanted to confront her on the spot, I realized I needed to stay silent for now. She couldn't know I was onto her. The lyrics from Curse All Flyers suddenly echoed in my mind. Back at home, I replaced the keys to cover my tracks, so she wouldn't suspect I'd uncovered her secrets. I also stopped by the hardware store to buy new locks. Carol didn't have the keys on her, but I wasn't going to risk it. Next, I went to the bank to investigate a mysterious safe deposit box I'd just learned about. Inside were bonds, only in her name. I photographed them again, still bewildered. Where had she gotten the money? Was she leading a double life? An escort, maybe? Who the hell was she? The moment I got back, Carol texted saying she was coming to collect her car. I replied bluntly, "The car's leased under my name. I'm paying for it because your income barely covers anything. I'll be using it for the next 2 months until the lease ends. Your things are in garbage bags. If you don't want them, I'll burn them in the fireplace. In fact, I'll stuff your wedding dress with straw, pretend it's you, and watch it go up in flames. The locks and alarm code have been changed, and don't even think about bringing Benning here. He won't like what'll happen if he does." Minutes later, her sister called, screaming insults. I ended the call and blocked her number without a second thought. Truth be told, I never really planned to torch the dress, but her panicked response made it clear how much it meant to her. I imagined her wearing it while marrying that bastard Benning. Screw it. I threw it into the fire. It had once been stunning, just like our marriage. Now both were nothing but ashes. An hour later, Carol arrived with Stephanie and Brian flanking her. Brian greeted me in a hushed tone. "Robert, how are you?" I laughed bitterly, like Caesar after Brutus plunged the knife. Then I shouted, "What do you think?" I'm furious at every single one of you for covering for her, for knowing the truth and keeping me in the dark. But more than anything, I'm enraged at myself for falling for that lying tramp. Carol winced when I called her that. She acted like I should treat her civilly. "Robert, I know you're hurting," she said. "But this isn't like you. You ruined the outfit I was going to wear for Bruce. That was uncalled for. I'll take my things and leave. I know I've hurt you, but I've always loved Bruce. You deserve someone who truly loves you, someone who'll give you children. You are special to me. I really valued our time together. If I hadn't met Bruce, I think I could have been truly happy with you. Can I have my wedding ring back? It'll remind me of the good times we shared," I shouted. "No way in hell. That ring's been in my family for generations. My mother cherished how perfectly it fit you. She believed we were meant for each other." "She doesn't know you're a scheming, two-faced whore." Carol recoiled at my words. Brian and Stephanie helped her carry the bags to the car. She looked at me and asked, "What about my wedding dress?" I told her to check the fire pit. When she saw the charred remains, she burst into tears. Stephanie hissed, "You bastard!" I looked her in the eyes and said, "Funny, coming from you. You've defended her for years. She won't be needing that dress when she marries that piece of trash. Those ashes? They're all that's left of my marriage, my life." "Who the hell do you think you are, bitch?" Although Brian looked stunned by my sudden outburst, he didn't step in to defend her. Of everyone present, he was the only one who seemed genuinely ashamed of what had happened the night before. Once Carol had composed herself, she asked if she could take one last look around to see if I might have overlooked anything. I agreed. While she was upstairs, I turned to Brian and told him we wouldn't be competing for any more titles. He gave a silent nod. Moments later, Carol came back down. Her voice was quiet. "Robert, I'm sorry. But the truth is, I've always loved Bruce," she said. "When we get divorced, you'll find someone who can love you the way you love others. You'll finally get the family you've always wanted. This is painful for both of us. I care deeply about you and I regret hurting you, but this is what's right." They walked out. I stepped back into the house. Just as I expected, she had come for the 2 hidden spare keys. Exhausted, I collapsed into bed, falling asleep before my head fully hit the pillow. It wasn't long before I was woken up by a phone call from my mother. Before I could speak, she launched into her fury. "Robert, I never imagined you'd ever hit a woman. Carol showed us photos of her bruises. She told us why she left you. Why would you do this?" I was already seething and didn't hold back. "Mom, she's lying to you, just like she's lied to me for the past 13 years. She's been with that scumbag the entire time we were married. She's manipulating everything to walk away with it all. I don't even know who she is anymore, or if I ever really knew her at all. I've never laid a hand on a woman in my life. You and Dad raised me better than that. Have you ever heard anyone say otherwise? Even last night, when I was full of rage, I still didn't touch her. You can choose to believe her lies or stand by me, but the truth will come out. If you side with her, I'm gone, for good." I hung up. The lines had been drawn. The war had officially started. I went out for dinner and came back home, more determined than ever. Now that I had the key pieces of the puzzle, I had to organize the facts. Like they always say in crime dramas, follow the money. So I did exactly that. I began with our joint accounts. What I uncovered was revealing. Thankfully, I'd made a copy of Carol's password book. That proved to be a game changer. I spent the entire evening and the following Sunday diving into details, trying to fit everything together. Along the way, I locked down my digital life and changed every password. It became horrifyingly clear I'd been taken for a fool. Every time she claimed she was visiting her sister, I'd conveniently be out competing or off on a trip with so-called friends. She was a monster. But what tore me apart the most was my own blindness. How had I missed the signs? Why didn't I ever question those trips? Why hadn't I suspected anything? What was wrong with me? How could she betray me so completely? On Monday morning, I arrived at the office early. I needed to check my vacation and comp time. Sandra from HR always came in before everyone else. She noticed something was off right away. Sandra and I had dated back in high school. We'd been very close. She ended things back then, and though she'd stayed single, I rarely heard anything about her dating. "Robert?" she asked gently. "What's going on? You look heartbroken." I gave her a hollow smile. "My world fell apart," I told her. "Friday was our anniversary. It was supposed to be a beautiful romantic evening, but she planned the whole thing so that her lover could take her away right in front of everyone. Turns out she's been seeing him for years, whenever she had 5 or 6 days free after her so-called girls' nights. 2, maybe 3 times a year. I spent 13 years with someone who never loved me, and now she's accusing me of abuse to make me look like the villain. She wants to burn everything to the ground. I have never hit a woman, Sandra, but I need time to think. I need advice." Sandra looked stunned. She got up and wrapped me in a hug. "Robert, I know you'd never hurt anyone, especially a woman. After we broke up, I hated myself for being too scared to stay. You've always been a man of integrity, kind, loyal, decent. I don't care what she says. I believe in who you are. Here, take my number and email. If you need anything, even just someone to talk to, call me. There are so many women out there who know the kind of man you really are. None of them will believe the lies of that woman." I was just getting back to my desk when my boss called me into his office. He was clearly displeased. The day before, Carol had turned up at his place with photographs that supposedly showed me mistreating her. I was livid. "Mr. Dutchard, you've known me for years, and yet you're ready to side with a deceitful, manipulative liar?" I snapped. "If you want me gone, just say the word. I'll walk out right now. I've got 9.5 weeks left, and that more than satisfies the notice requirement." I added coldly, "When the truth finally surfaces, don't think I'll come crawling back to teach your next batch of clueless trainees. Let them crash and burn. I won't lose sleep over it." I printed out a resignation letter, signed it, and dropped it in the internal post like a final bullet. As I walked out, the stunned faces of my co-workers told me they hadn't expected such fury from me. I spent the rest of the morning tying up loose ends. Digging into the financials, I discovered something interesting. Over the past year and a half, Carol had stayed multiple times at a hotel located a 3-hour drive away, always during visits to her so-called sister, another expert in lying, must run in the family. With my suitcase packed, I hit the road. Driving felt strangely therapeutic, maybe even more so because I hadn't handed the car over to Carol no matter how much it bugged her. When I arrived at the hotel and parked, I wasn't sure I'd get what I was after. Still, I figured karma might be on my side. I dropped my bag in the room and headed straight to the front desk. The receptionist looked concerned, assuming there was a problem with the room, but I reassured her. "Room's great," I said. "I just need to speak with the manager." Soon, the manager appeared. I explained the situation and asked if he could help, though I knew the answer before he spoke. He gave me a polite but firm response. No access without a court order. Exactly what I expected, so I leaned in a little. "The guy she's meeting here? He's running the same scam on another woman in this town. She's working with me now." That caught the front desk clerk's attention. Once the manager left, she leaned in and spoke softly. "I know the couple you're talking about. They've stayed here a lot. He's a real piece of work. I'm actually friends with the woman he scammed. He practically stalked her, forced her to sell off everything she had just to pay him. I can put you in touch with her lawyer. She's damn good. Even the sheriff believed her, but the guy still won the case because of some doctored photos." She added, "With her help, you can get a court order for the hotel's surveillance footage." I nodded in appreciation. "Thanks. Honestly, if they'd just walked away and stuck to the prenup, I probably wouldn't have lifted a finger. But now they want to destroy my life. They picked the wrong person." About 15 minutes later, I was sitting across from a firecracker of a woman named Heather Morrison, sharp, intense, and unafraid to cuss when necessary. I laid out everything I had discovered, every detail. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Do you have all the evidence on you?" I nodded. "I've got it on my phone and my camera. Everything's backed up and better organized on my laptop at the hotel." She gave me a fierce, satisfied look. "If you can be here by 7:30 tomorrow morning, we'll review everything, then head to the courthouse when it opens at 8:30. I'm confident I can get the sheriff to issue a warrant for those surveillance tapes." I nodded, encouraged. "From what I've found, He uses this hotel chain regularly. And I've already identified 3 other women who fell for his con. I paused. I'm not sure how deep Carol's involved or if she's just being used, but either way, I'm not backing down. I'll need to hire someone back in my town. Heather grinned. If you'll have me, I'll represent you. And trust me, when that bastard sees me in court, he'll know the storm's coming. He'll be terrified. He damn well should be. I laughed for the first time since Friday night. For the first time in days, I actually believed everything might turn out okay. I had convinced myself I'd given up on people, but that turned out to be wrong. The next morning, stepping into the office, I was caught off guard by the sight of an unfamiliar man sitting there. Heather introduced him as Jim. He was Betsy's father, the same Betsy Benning had taken advantage of. He was also the private investigator now tasked with uncovering the rest of the story. I handed Heather an SD card loaded with everything we'd uncovered. I made sure to point out the files directly linked to Betsy. Jim leaned back slowly, exhaling like he'd been holding it in for hours. He said with grim conviction, I knew from the start that the only solution was to make that scumbag vanish. I had no choice. The world's better off without him. Heather and I made our way to the courthouse. Jim, meanwhile, would begin tracking down the other 3 women Benning had victimized. Heather focused on finding Samantha Wiseman, the woman who, according to the documents, held the key evidence that could clear me and the others. But one question loomed large. Was she a participant or just another pawn? At the courthouse, Heather spoke briefly with a woman working the front desk. I had assumed we were there to meet the sheriff. She went into great detail with the clerk, which struck me as odd. Shouldn't this conversation have happened with the sheriff directly? About 15 minutes later, a man who had been sitting quietly in the back finally stood up and approached us. Janine, call Betsy. Tell her not to give another cent to that bastard and absolutely don't let her sell the house. I'll make sure the court rules in her favor, he said. Turning to Heather, he added, Here's your warrant. It covers every hotel in the chain. If Marvin gives you any trouble, remind him I've got a cell waiting for him. With that, he walked away. I stood there, stunned. Heather chuckled at my reaction. That's Sheriff Griffiths. He's sharp, and he puts the truth above the law when he has to, she said. Let's go deal with Marvin. At the hotel, Marvin, the manager, tried to delay by saying he had to consult his bosses, but Heather's intensity shook him. Soon, the head of security appeared, and Heather served him with the warrant. I may be methodical, but I had a detailed log of every trip Carol took to visit her sister during our relationship. We watched as the security officer entered names and dates into the system. Every reservation was made under Mr. and Mrs. Benning. Eventually, we located a video showing them together, sharing a meal, then entering their room. Altogether, we identified 26 hotel stays across the chain, though footage only existed for the past 18 months. Heather looked satisfied. I made a joke about one particular video that caught her attention. She jotted down a note, and the manager assured her all footage and records would be processed and sent to her office. Heather and I returned there shortly after. She looked at me and said, Robert, I've thought this through. We need to initiate the divorce proceedings now. If you file on the grounds of infidelity, they'll retaliate with allegations and try to use these videos against you. They'll spin the story first, leaving us with less room to trap them in their lies. You told her you were taking a vacation. Use that time. Let them start the process. They'll have to cite their evidence, and we'll dismantle it. Jim will handle tracking the rest of the women. We've already nailed Betsy's story, and I'll use the footage of your conversation to take this other woman down. I'll get to the bottom of Samantha's involvement. Meanwhile, my team will dig into the financials and piece together every angle. I gave a tired nod. I need time. I don't even know what I feel right now. But I want this whole thing broken apart. I'll be gone a few weeks. After that, I have to find a job. If anyone's willing to hire a guy accused of hitting his wife, even if it's all lies. I'm not some celebrity athlete. Honestly, learning that Benning was cheating with those other women gave me something I didn't expect. I wasn't the only one who'd been deceived. Finding proof helped all of us. I didn't feel as useless anymore. Mostly I just felt worn out, sad. And when I thought about that night, I burned with rage. I stayed a few more nights before moving on. While I was still in Hamilton, I headed south to Staffordshire to ride roller coasters. They're surprisingly good for releasing stress. When I got back, I drove north and started exploring the countryside above Inverness. I had just finished the North Coast 500 and relocated to the Northeast, where I set off along the Grampian 250. While there, I took the Glenlivet Smugglers Trail and treated myself to a couple of modern Glenlivet drams in a cozy boutique tucked deep in the hills. Although I'd always lived close to those mountain ranges, this was my first real visit. The views were stunning, so much so that I chose to block out the negativity around me. I found joy in the journey and exploration, but deep down, there was a persistent pain I couldn't shake. As the end of my rental period approached, I made my way back home. Pulling into the driveway, I was caught off guard. The garden and lawn were in surprisingly good shape. I'd expected a wild, overgrown mess. Just then, Gordon, my neighbor, stepped out and waved. "Well, look who's back," he said with a grin. "How's life treating you?" I laughed. "As well as it can, all things considered." "Did you have a hand in this?" He chuckled. "A woman named Sandra called while you were gone. Said she was worried about you." Shared a bit of what happened. I was stunned. I hadn't thought Carol would ever do something like that. She really could have been an actress. Sandra, along with a few other women, and with Gordon's help, had taken care of my garden. He warned me that not everything had survived and mentioned that some officials had been around asking for me. "Don't be surprised if they come knocking," he said. I thanked him and told him I had errands to run. "Stop by later. We'll have a couple of beers." I shook my head as I drove off, still processing it all. Sandra and I had been in touch a few times a week since I left, but she never mentioned the help with the house. She encouraged me to talk about my feelings and just listened when I broke down. I owed her something meaningful in return. Later, Gordon and I were having a quiet chat out on the patio when the doorbell rang. A court officer handed me divorce papers, his expression smug. I gave him a smile and replied, "I hope this judge has no patience for liars." I phoned Heather immediately. She asked me to scan and email the documents to her so she could handle the legal response. She seemed satisfied with the situation but refused to explain much. When I asked for details, she simply said, "The less you know, the less you can accidentally tell anyone else." 7 weeks later, I was back in court with Heather for her hearing. Jim was by her side, and I could see how content he looked. When he saw me, he pulled me into a hug without a word. Inside the courtroom, I sat with Heather and Jim. Right behind us were Sandra, Josie, Michaela, Gordon, Bill, and several others who refused to let me go through it alone. My brother Dan called me often for support, though he couldn't attend because of work obligations. He had distanced himself from our parents after they chose to believe Carol's version of events. Honestly, that didn't surprise me. Carol's colleagues, Stephanie and Amy, were also there behind her. Benning stood beside Carol with a cocky smirk plastered on his face, until Heather and Jim entered. His expression faltered immediately. I had no doubt Jim had a backup plan if the legal system failed to handle Benning. Even my parents were there, sitting on Carol's side. I avoided their eyes just as I ignored Carol when she glanced at me. Bill didn't hold back. "She looks like a power-dressed slut," he muttered, loud enough to turn heads. I could only imagine the glares he got from her and Stephanie. Bill had a particular talent for riling up Steph. The trial began with Carol's lawyer, Miss Johnston, speaking first. She carried herself with poise and confidence. "My client wishes to enter into a prenuptial agreement limiting her claim to just 10% of the shared assets. She acknowledges an affair, but claims it followed years of emotional mistreatment in her marriage to Robert Benson. She seeks a divorce on the grounds of spousal abuse and requests the court divide the assets by order. She also asks for a general judgment in her favor." Miss Johnston handed copies of the financial documents to both Heather and the court clerk, who passed them to the sheriff. Heather struggled to keep a straight face. The sheriff looked perplexed by the need to exchange physical documents. Then Heather stood. "My lord, because of Ms. Benson's behavior, mediation wasn't possible before today. When the court hears the evidence, the reason will be clear. Miss Johnston and I briefly discussed the order in which the evidence would be presented. She wishes to submit all of her client's claims against Mr. Benson before I begin cross-examination. I am fine with this on the condition that I'm allowed to re-question the witnesses once she's done. If not, I'll address them as they're introduced." The sheriff considered this for a moment. "This isn't standard procedure, but I can see why Ms. Johnston would want to present her client's full case at once." "Very well, I'll permit it, but you'll have your chance to cross-examine afterward." Heather nodded and resumed her opening arguments. My client firmly requests that the prenuptial agreement be upheld in its entirety and further asks the court to consider reducing the plaintiff's financial claims due to her intentional deception. Her lies not only served to deflect responsibility for her infidelity, but were calculated attempts to tarnish his good name, undermine his integrity, and jeopardize his future prospects. This was not a case of confusion or miscommunication. Her actions were methodical and malicious, intended to bring down a man who has shown nothing but honesty, kindness, and emotional generosity. In stark contrast, she and her live-in partner exhibit behavior typical of manipulators and frauds, lacking in moral substance. We are in the process of securing child support payments from Carol Benson as a direct consequence of Mr. Benson's job loss, an outcome rooted in the plaintiff's fabrications. Her falsehoods not only derailed his professional career, but also fractured long-standing friendships and permanently damaged his bond with his parents, with whom he once shared a deep connection. There was never any spousal abuse, and we intend to demonstrate that clearly and convincingly. Heather straightened in her seat, a quiet confidence on her face. She was ready. She was determined. Carol stepped into the witness box. I could sense her gaze fixed on me, but I refused to meet it. I stared forward, never once letting my eyes wander in her direction. Her attorney began by recounting how Carol and I met, describing the early years of our marriage, and then pivoting to claims of escalating violence on my part. Carol spoke through trembling lips and theatrical pauses. "Robert didn't like it when I worked the night shift," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "He probably assumed I was spending time with one of the doctors." According to her, his anger festered each night until it finally exploded into physical violence. She described being struck in the face repeatedly, hiding the bruises with makeup during her shifts, and retreating to her sister's home between work to heal in private. She painted a picture of a cycle, calm, returning only until the next night's shift reignited the alleged violence. Carol claimed her sister had urged her to leave me, insisting the situation was dangerous. Her sister had even taken photographs, warning Carol she'd need evidence for the inevitable divorce. Then her lawyer asked, "Were you having an affair?" Carol gave a small, bitter laugh. "I'm ashamed to admit it, but yes." She claimed she had known Bruce from his early days as a resident doctor. She said she bumped into him by coincidence near her sister's home. Bruce saw the marks on her skin and reacted with compassion. She said his support made her feel valued again, no longer a shell of a woman, but someone who could be loved. They slept together, she confessed, and claimed he made her feel whole, not broken. Her attorney then guided her through a series of events leading up to our anniversary dinner, what happened there and what came after. She wanted her ring returned, and I, she said, responded by threatening to tear it from her hand and crush Bruce's hands, those of a surgeon, with violence. My anger, she testified, terrified her, especially considering the history she had just described. She admitted I had held on to the jewelry I had gifted her, though she made it clear that only the engagement ring mattered to her. Carol's fury reached its peak as she described how her personal belongings were dumped in a bucket. When she returned to retrieve them, she found her wedding dress destroyed, reduced to ashes. She wept openly, and her lawyer beamed with satisfaction. Her sister Carrie was called next, followed by Stephanie and then Bruce Benning himself. Each offered statements critical of my behavior, despite none of them having witnessed any of the alleged incidents firsthand. Their testimonies were echoes, not observations. Carrie confirmed that she had taken the photos, a revelation that seemed to please Heather greatly. By the time Bruce finished giving his version of events, evening had fallen, and the judge adjourned the court until the following morning. As I exited the courthouse, Sandra approached. Her voice rang out, filled with disbelief. "I've never heard such revolting lies in my life," she said, loudly enough for others to hear. She embraced me, followed by others who showed support. But my parents, who once knew me better than anyone, remained stone-faced. The silent judgment in their eyes said everything. They had made up their minds. The next morning, Heather called Carol back to the witness stand. The warmth and composure she'd worn the day before had vanished. She was now precise, relentless. Her questions were sharp, deliberate, each one landing like a needle. "Miss Reese," she began, referring to Carol's maiden name, "you testified that after suffering injuries inflicted by your husband, you became reacquainted with Bruce Benning, a doctor you had known from his internship at your hospital." Heather paused, letting the silence stretch. "Was he so irresistible that you, a married woman, allowed yourself to be seduced? Is that really what happened?" Carol turned red. "Yes," she whispered. Then Heather played a recording of a conversation Carol and I had shared earlier that very evening in question. "You've been the most wonderful husband a woman could ask for," Carol's voice said. "Tonight, I'll only dance with you." And then, a little softer, "And when we get back to the hotel?" Heather turned toward Carol with a faint smile. "Are those the words of a woman who's been abused?" Carol didn't answer. I made an effort to show concern, but his constant torment only bred resentment in me. Heather resumed her questioning. "On your 10th wedding anniversary, you dressed up to impress your lover, yet you also declared your devotion to your husband. You fulfilled every role expected of a loyal spouse in a loving marriage, didn't you?" Carol faltered in her reply. "I tried to make him happy," she said. Heather hit the play button. Her movement was resolute. There was no hint of hesitation, no attempt to derive any real joy for me from it. Heather's voice cut in again. "A masterful performance, flawless in your portrayal of the affectionate wife, even as you prepared to betray him without mercy." She kept her tone sharp. "You and your longtime affair partner conspired to disgrace Mr. Benson, a man whose only mistake was loving someone who didn't deserve it." She tapped another button. Carol's voice rang out, unmistakable. "Robert, the man I was dancing with, was Bruce Benning. He was my first love, my only love." I audibly inhaled as her words played. Carol's voice carried on. "We were together before I ever met you. Over the years, we met occasionally. He was pursuing pediatric neurosurgery, and a real relationship wasn't possible then. When I got together with you, he supported it. He thought you were kind and honorable. I enjoyed the time we shared, but I always loved Bruce. He's the reason I couldn't bear to have your children. You'd have been devastated if I'd left and taken them away. Bruce is now the head of neurosurgery at the hospital in Leeds. I'm traveling with him. I'm sorry that you're suffering. Still, while we were married, I gave myself to you completely, so that you'd never suspect I belonged to someone else emotionally. If Bruce hadn't come back, I could have stayed with you forever, content to be your wife." Heather's recording ended with me retching into a waste bin, a reaction too honest to be staged. The gallery gasped, multiple people reacting audibly. Carol looked shaken for a moment, but she quickly regained her poise. "I tried to protect his pride," she said, recovering. "I lied to spare him the humiliation." Heather clicked another button and footage appeared. Carol standing just outside our home. Heather gave a knowing smile. "Luckily, your husband was meticulous with dates and records. We reviewed them. According to what he tracked, you claimed to be visiting your sister in Covington. From May 9th to the 14th, the 31st, the 22nd, and on several other dates leading up to your marriage." Carol responded curtly. "Yes." Heather pressed yet another button. Footage began to roll. Carol and Bruce in hotels on those very days. For the dates without video, reservation forms and billing statements confirmed their presence. Heather faced the judge. These were retrieved legally with a court order issued by the Hamilton County Sheriff's Court. "All related documentation has been submitted to your office and to Miss Johnston." Then she turned back to Carol, now dressed in stark white. "Fascinating, isn't it? Not a single bruise visible. It's as if the abuse never occurred. It would seem that you, Miss Reese, and Mr. Benning had quite the affinity for hotel rooms. Places you claimed were visits to your sisters." She paused, letting the implication settle. "He didn't rescue you. He used you." Carol shot Heather a venomous glare. I fought back a smirk. Laughter rippled through the spectators behind me. Heather's demeanor turned colder, sharper. "And now let's examine the fabricated finances you presented to the court. Per your agreement with Mr. Benson, you were each to contribute part of your salaries to a shared account. You said it was about keeping your financial independence. But that's only part of the truth, isn't it? The real reason was to conceal your earnings from Mr. Benson, to create a financial cushion in case you ever decided to walk away. He was nothing more than a means to your end. For years, you pretended to be his lawful wife. Another lie among many. You told him over and over that you were a general nurse barely earning a standard wage. But the truth? As he put it so plainly, you were Benning's plaything. You had risen far beyond what you let on, earning nearly 4 times what you reported to Mr. Benson. You failed to adjust your financial contributions despite the clear agreement to do so. You cried poverty when you wanted a new vehicle, asking Mr. Benson to take on the lease, even as you drove that car around during your secret rendezvous with Mr. Benning. And you felt no shame funding those escapades using the joint account you shared with Mr. Benson. So naturally, the financial statements you submitted to the court? Complete fiction. Heather tapped another button, and suddenly Carol's bank records filled the screen, evidence plain as day. They displayed substantial savings, regular high-value deposits from her actual job, information she had concealed all this time. The woman who claimed to avoid promotions was actually the 3rd most senior nurse in her entire hospital. Then Heather turned to the bonds. "How do you explain them being in your name?" she asked, "and stored in your own safety deposit box?" Carol's expression froze in disbelief. I watched her reflection flicker across the monitor's surface. I stared forward, deliberately avoiding eye contact, trying to look unmoved. Carol tried to justify herself. "I was protecting myself after the abuse," she said. Heather pressed on. "These are Miss Reese's verified personal details," she explained, referencing the bond's date and value. She passed the paperwork to the court clerk and to Miss Johnston, who had finally lost her smug expression. Heather allowed herself a confident smile. I could tell she was about to deliver the blow. "You're asking for your wedding ring back?" she asked. "That ring? A family heirloom? Surely you realize an adulteress has no right to such a thing. Is it sentiment you're clinging to? A keepsake from a decent, loving man? A man you used until his love was no longer useful to you?" Carol, her voice defiant yet trembling, said, "I loved that ring. It meant everything to me, especially after he set fire to my wedding dress. I want it back." Heather didn't flinch. With a calm press of another button, she displayed a new image on the courtroom screen. It showed Bruce Benning and Carol Reese together, 9 months before my final contact with her. They were at a hospital appointment. She wore an engagement ring. Heather resumed, "This article paints quite the scene. Mr. Benning, proud and exuberant, showing off a rare, stunning engagement ring for his bride-to-be." She repeated the words more sharply. "He gave it to her. Now, doesn't that ring look familiar? Suspiciously similar to the one Mr. Benson unknowingly gave to a woman falsely claiming to be his fiancée." Heather turned back to the court. "This entire act, it was a performance, wasn't it? Designed to convince the hospital that Benning was in a committed relationship. You knew they preferred their surgeons married, more rooted in the community, more trustworthy. Love had nothing to do with it. It was status you craved, position, prestige. You needed that ring not for love, but for appearances. The image of a doctor's wife, that was your ultimate prize, all part of the charade to fool the hospital board." Then came Heather's most devastating line. "You do realize Benning only needs you as long as he wants to stay here?" I nearly laughed aloud. "Still crying over that wedding dress? Were you planning to wear it, if, not when, Benning ever made good on his promise?" Carol tried to respond. "No," but it came out thin and broken. Tears betrayed her, and none of us missed it. Heather hit the final switch. A voice recording played. It was Stephanie's. "She invited him to your wedding," Stephanie said. "She hoped he'd stop it. Demand it. Before he married you." Carol broke down. "Mr. Benson's only fault was that he saw you through the lens of his love. He never glimpsed the real you, the manipulative, cold-hearted deceiver beneath the mask. You couldn't walk away from a man of honor and simply bear the loss, could you? He would have never known about the affairs, the financial lies, the deep betrayal if you'd left quietly. But instead, you waited, you watched, and you savored his downfall. You saw Robert Benson as nothing more than a gullible obstacle, a placeholder, a backup plan until your real love could set you free with wealth and reputation. And above all, you despised his capacity to love you so fully. Which is why you made it your mission to ruin him when you left. The deepest cruelty you inflicted wasn't just betrayal. It was your calculated effort to shatter his self-worth and his identity as a man, leaving him incapable of ever opening his heart to someone again. But that devastation alone wasn't enough for you. You wanted his name dragged so thoroughly through the mud that no one would ever see him the same way. You aimed to wreck his professional standing, to ensure his life unraveled into something unrecognizable and unlivable. Let the record show, Mr. Benson never once mistreated you. However, the court may reach a very different conclusion regarding the psychological and emotional torment you subjected him to during your years together. You denied him fatherhood. You drained his finances. You exploited his devotion like it was nothing. Heather delivered the final blow. You and the man you now lie with devised a scheme to destroy someone who loved you unconditionally, supported your every need, and never let you go without. And now you intend to marry that man, a known philanderer with no loyalty in his bones. Heather's tone grew icy. I wonder how secure that coveted job of yours will be once all this is laid bare. If it's still there after the trial, how long do you think you'll last? Carol sat frozen, stunned by the venomous precision of Heather's words. Miss Johnston had no more questions to ask. As her sister and Bruce Benning made to exit the courtroom, Heather's voice cut through the air. "Officer, stop them. We're not finished." Carrie, her sister, slowly walked to the witness stand. Heather kept it sharp and brief. "Did you lie to this court to help conceal your sister's affair with Bruce Benning?" Carrie's eyes welled up. Her voice trembled. "Yes." Heather followed up instantly. "Were you the one who took the photos of the supposed injuries?" Carrie's reply was faint. "No." Heather concluded flatly. "I'll be notifying your church leadership of your hypocrisy." "There's nothing Christian in what you've done." Carrie's eyes grew wide with panic. Her fear was immediate and real. "Screw you, bitch!" she snapped. Next, Heather addressed Stephanie. "Your turn." Stephanie stood up, her posture rigid with tension. Heather approached more softly this time. "How long have you known about the affair?" Stephanie replied without hesitation. "It was with Robert." "Carol always belonged to Bruce." Heather smirked. "Then why lie for her?" Stephanie hesitated. "I didn't lie. I just repeated what I was told." Heather didn't let up. "Did you ever see the bruises she claimed to have?" "No," Stephanie admitted. "But she was so emotional. I believed her." Heather continued pressing, but Stephanie clung to her version of events, unwilling to admit she'd been manipulated. Heather sliced through her defenses methodically. There was no plausible way left for Stephanie to backtrack. Then came the final strike. "Tell me, do you even know how to tell the truth anymore? How many men have you been involved with? Are you planning to use this same tactic on your husband if someone more appealing enters your life?" Stephanie looked stunned. "I love my husband. I would never do that." At that moment, Heather tapped a key and a video played for the court. On screen, Stephanie and her husband, Amy Grant, were seen exiting a room to meet with Carol and Bruce. Stephanie, caught in the act, collapsed forward onto the bench in shock. From the gallery, Amy erupted. "You goddamn bitch!" she screamed, storming out. The fallout wouldn't be long. Brian and Grant would soon know the truth. Heather turned to the presiding sheriff. "Your Honor, may I request to call one more witness before I begin cross-examining Bruce Benning? Their testimony will bring much-needed clarity to these proceedings." The sheriff gave a nod of approval. What happened next I would only understand later when Bill explained the impact. At the mention of a single name, Samantha Wiseman, Bruce Benning clutched his chest. A stranger took her place at the stand. She was radiant, like someone straight out of a luxury beauty ad. Flawless, calm, controlled. Heather gave a knowing smile. "Miss Wiseman, can you tell us about your profession?" Samantha answered confidently. "I'm a creative in theater, film, and television. I specialize in visual storytelling, through textures, cosmetics, and illusions. Whether it's transforming skin or designing elaborate physical effects, I craft moments that feel utterly real." She added, "Think of those sidewalk artists who draw giant pits in the road or trains that seem to crash through walls. I bring that kind of illusion to life, but on the human body." Heather's next question was already forming. "Are you familiar with Bruce Benning?" Heather's voice was calm but probing. Samantha responded with care. "Yes, I met him during a trip to Bristol. My son, Alan, had been diagnosed with a non-cancerous brain tumor, and Mr. Benning performed the surgery. It went well. This was 8 years ago. Heather followed up. "And how did Mr. Benning come to recognize your talents?" Samantha replied with measured clarity. "After Alan's operation, his motor skills were affected. He needed help regaining full use of his hand and arm. I spent time with him using modeling clay, shaping creatures from his favorite stories. One day while we were sculpting, Mr. Benning walked in. He seemed intrigued by what we were doing and struck up a conversation." Heather raised a brow. "And that's where it ended?" Samantha shook her head. "Not quite. Halloween was around the corner, and he asked me to do some costume work for him. He wanted to portray an abusive husband. He said it was a joke, that his friends thought he was too straight-laced to take one. He claimed people misjudged him, that he wasn't some controlling figure who couldn't take rejection or a challenge from a woman. He said this would prove them wrong. I designed his look for 3 separate parties that year," she continued. "Each time I adjusted the bruises slightly so they weren't identical. I've done similar work for him on 3 other occasions, spaced out over several years." Heather asked, "Other than Mr. Benning, are you acquainted with anyone else involved in this trial?" Samantha scanned the room. "Yes, Carol and another woman, also named Samantha. I did their makeup for events in Liverpool last year. They told me their husbands had never laid a finger on them. They just wanted to see how their social circles would respond if it looked like they had been abused." Heather pressed a control. Images of Carol and the other Samantha filled the screen. They were clearly photos of Samantha's work in progress, each transformation documented in full. Their skin had been flawless before the makeup began. By the end, the illusion was chillingly convincing. "I remember thinking I'd accidentally struck Carol myself when I saw the end result," Samantha said quietly. "Her transformation was that convincing. Seeing those photos used in court, I recognized them instantly." Heather hesitated, her voice soft but pointed. "Are you saying that all of the injuries in these images were fabricated by you and none were real?" Samantha nodded solemnly. "They arrived with unmarked skin. When they walked out, they looked as though they'd been beaten." Heather narrowed in. "Were you aware that these images would later be used to frame their husbands for abuse? Or that Mr. Benning would use similar tactics to retaliate against women who had turned him down?" The color drained from Samantha's face. "No, absolutely not. If I had known what they were planning, I would have gone straight to those men and offered to testify for them." Heather simply said, "Thank you." Miss Johnston, visibly shaken, had nothing further to ask. Her silence spoke volumes. The sheriff gave a small, satisfied hum, signaling that the matter seemed settled. Yet Heather wasn't done. She had more to uncover. As Bruce Benning took the stand, 2 men entered the courtroom, their eyes locked only on him. Benning, visibly unsettled, avoided looking back. I couldn't take my eyes off him either. I'd been waiting for this. The moment I'd rehearsed in my mind was finally here, and my smile was razor sharp. Heather began her questioning. "You were involved in an affair with Miss Reese before she became Mrs. Benson, correct?" Benning raised his chin, his tone defensive. "No, I only ever stepped in to help her." Heather systematically dismantled his version of events. His smugness made my skin crawl. Every answer seemed designed to elevate himself, to showcase his brilliance. He couldn't help but flaunt his ego. Then Heather revealed her trump card. Her relentless questioning had boxed him in, and as she presented her final piece of evidence, it felt like the floor dropped out from under him. With a calm but deadly smile, Heather concluded, "Yesterday you claimed your relationship with Miss Reese began only recently, after her alleged abuse by Mr. Benson. But today, I've presented the court with extensive records. Decades of hotel visits, overnight stays, and meetings that spanned days. Evidence of a long-standing affair." "She mocked your attempts at intimacy?" Benning's temper flared. "That's not true," he said sharply. "We only recently became involved." Heather didn't flinch. "Yet numerous hotel guests lodged complaints about the noise coming from your room," she said coolly. "Something about your moose-like howls during your so-called private time." Are all your neighbors at the hotel making this up? She asked, watching Benning closely as she listed each grievance. Her expression was almost amused. And these aren't the only issues. There's more. Heather began to conclude her barrage. You've lied to hide your affair with a married woman. You've deceived your superiors, insisting what we just witnessed was all fictional. Then pointedly, are you even a real surgeon, or is that just another lie? Benning's voice rose. I am a surgeon, one of the top in my field. Heather let out a short, contemptuous laugh. Perhaps you're a skilled surgeon, but as a person, you're repulsive. She tapped a control, and the screen began to display images, photos paired with letters detailing Benning's disturbing pattern of behavior. Each image and document painted a picture of calculated manipulation, using friendships with women like Betsy to orchestrate lawsuits that earned him large financial settlements. Court transcripts showed all of the women had denied assaulting him. Heather revealed that, based on Benning's own documents, these accusations were manufactured in retaliation for them rejecting his advances. He had convinced the sheriff, despite contradicting evidence, by manipulating those very photographs. Heather turned back to him. She asked direct, cutting questions about the incriminating content, some of which he couldn't answer. Then she peeled away the last layer of his defense, recounting how he'd consistently mistreated and betrayed the women in his life. Your peers were right, weren't they? She said, her voice calm but damning. You can't handle a woman who dares say no, especially if she owns something you want, she continued. You abused the courts, you fabricated assaults, you hunted women like prey. You are a petty, bitter man, small in every conceivable way. Benning's rage boiled over, and the sheriff took notice. Heather nearly laughed when he lost control and called her a bloody witch. His bravado was crumbling. The reality of what he'd done and what was coming was finally starting to hit him. Having thoroughly dismantled his lies about the women, Heather turned her focus to the centerpiece of her case. She brought up records of his communications with Carol, emails, meeting logs, messages. Benning denied everything. He claimed they hadn't spoken during the time frame in question. But then she displayed the damning evidence, a meticulous plan to frame me for assaulting Carol. A gasp rose from the audience, someone sobbing, possibly Carol herself, as the truth sank in. Heather revealed every piece of his scheme, showing how Benning had plotted to destroy my life. He tried to dismiss it all, calling it lover's drama, meaningless games, saying they never would have followed through. But Heather cut him off. No, this is exactly what you were doing, she said. You manipulated his parents. You deceived his employer. You even convinced Miss Johnston to bring the matter before this particular judge. Then came more files. She faced Benning directly. You weren't planning to stop, were you? You were already working on your next con, ready to extract more money, weren't you? Benning denied it again, but unease was written all over his face. He cast nervous glances at the two men beside him and at Carol. Heather paused for effect, much like someone preparing to serve dessert after a brutal meal. She hit a final button. A collective breath escaped the audience. A new screen appeared, revealing Benning's plan to drain Carol of her wealth once she no longer served his needs. And the groan that followed? Almost certainly Carol. I heard the unmistakable sound of someone like her quietly crying. On the monitor, Benning's scheme became clear. He planned to marry Carol as a stepping stone to secure his role as chief of neurosurgery. His long game was obvious. Within a few years, he would pick up advanced surgical techniques and emigrate to the U.S., where he anticipated earning a fortune. Carol, however, was disposable. Once she served her purpose, he would ensure she was caught in an affair and use it as grounds to strip her of everything. I could hear Carol's quiet weeping as the realization hit her. Her dream life was falling apart. Her name and reputation were ruined beyond repair. Heather took control from there. You have committed perjury in this court and in others, all in pursuit of financial gain, she declared. I suspect the courts will show little sympathy for you. She revealed that Sheriff Griffiths in Hamilton had issued a warrant for Benning's arrest and that the officers present were there to carry it out. On behalf of the women you've deceived, she added, I've secured a court order freezing all your assets, which has already been executed as of this morning. She glanced at Miss Reese. I believe you now understand what you've lost, compared to a manipulator who preys on vulnerable women to patch his own inadequacy. Two officers stepped forward and escorted a stunned Benning out of the courtroom. Heather then summoned me to the stand. She recounted my marriage, how I was taken completely by surprise. She detailed everything that had happened earlier that evening. I admitted, humiliatingly, that I had urinated myself after angrily discarding what belonged to him. I described the emotional wreckage, the disbelief, the betrayal. Worse still, they had accused me of abuse, falsely, spreading it to others. Those lies cost me everything: my parents, my job, my social circle. I remained unemployed. No company would touch me, even though my engineering credentials were outstanding. Everything I valued had been stripped away. The sheriff concluded the day's proceedings by stating that he would rule on the division of assets the following morning. He looked me in the eye and said, "Mr. Benson, you have been fully exonerated. You've narrowly avoided a profound miscarriage of justice." He acknowledged the character my lawyer had described: honest, compassionate, principled. "You deserve someone who reflects those same qualities. I hope your future is brighter," he said, ending formally. "As for the individuals who lied," he added, "I'll address them in this courtroom tomorrow." Afterwards, Jim embraced Heather. Then he came to me. Bill, Sandra, and several others followed suit. I noticed my mother silently crying. She had lost not just her daughter, but her son, too, in all but blood. Dan's revelations had clearly taken a toll. Her visits to her grandchildren had become rare. The following day, the sheriff formally dissolved the marriage and enforced the terms of our prenuptial agreement. He ruled that she must repay her share of the joint account, along with the funds she had improperly used to support her affair. He added the full value of her car, an expense she could easily afford. There were also bonds, and he awarded me my rightful portion. She was ordered to pay spousal maintenance for a set period, until I secured a job with a salary comparable to the one I had lost because of her deceit. Heather's team had carefully calculated all of this, and the figures were submitted with court documentation. Carol appeared composed, but there was no concealing the signs. Samantha likely couldn't cover up the evidence of many hours spent crying. The sheriff sternly warned Carol. He was considering jail time for perjury. Had she succeeded in deceiving the court and the truth emerged later, she'd be looking at years behind bars. He fined her $5,000 and handed her a 3-month suspended sentence. If she failed to pay my legal fees in full within 30 days, the suspension would be revoked. Both Carrie and Samantha were penalized as well, $1,000 fines each, due within the same time frame. Benning later appeared before the Hamilton Sheriff Court, where he tried to justify his actions to Sheriff Griffiths. Later, while having coffee, Heather, Jim, and I discussed the next steps. Heather intended to take her case to the General Medical Council to seek Benning's removal from the medical registry. While we talked, Jim received a phone call. It was Hamilton Court. Benning had already been taken into custody. Sheriff Griffiths had made his position clear to the defense. Unless Benning deposited all the money he had defrauded from the 4 women into the court's account before his next appearance, he'd be looking at a lengthy prison term. On top of that, the sheriff expected full reimbursement of court costs and any other legitimate expenses caused by Benning's false accusations. Even if he managed to pay, incarceration still seemed inevitable. Heather was also filing a complaint with the General Board of Nursing. Carol's actions, given her senior role, were indefensible. Heather doubted it would lead to professional sanctions. Carol hadn't misused her official position like Benning, but the complaint would at least be on record, giving future employers cause for caution. As for me, I needed a job, and I wanted no further association with Carol. Heather recommended that I continue paying child support until I found new employment. Out of nowhere, Jim made a quiet suggestion. "Why don't you stay with Sandra for a while?" he said. "She seems to have a soft spot for you. Whenever we talk, she comes across as genuinely warm. Maybe you two can help each other. She once told me she can't be what you're looking for, whatever that means. But maybe that's a place to start. Let me say this once. After everything you've endured, you really should talk to a counselor. Even with that bright smile you always wear, you're clearly carrying a heavy burden. You're not hiding it as well as you think. A good counselor can help you reconnect with yourself, rediscover joy, and build a life that feels meaningful again. You deserve that chance. Heather and I have witnessed more than our fair share of hardship over the years. But your story? It belongs in a book or on the big screen. You're that rare kind of person, honest, kind, and full of integrity. Let me help you get that person back. And the best revenge you can have on all of them? Build a damn beautiful life in spite of it all. When we said goodbye, Heather's parting words actually made me laugh. And if you're under the impression that the sheriff gave her a break by not locking her up, you're wrong. He didn't go easy on her. As for me, my legal fees came to around $24,000. Yours would have been far less. You were instrumental in helping Betsy, but she'll never understand just how much you did for her. Dan dropped by after work that evening. He was beaming, happy for me. He looked exhausted, though. Their new baby was keeping them up all night. They'd decided to go for a third child, hoping this time for a boy. And sure enough, he got his wish. Our parents hadn't yet met the baby. Dan offered me a position on the night shift, but I turned it down. I wasn't confident in my skills for that kind of role. He gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder and said, "You'll find the right person. You'll get the family you dream of. At least until the first diaper disaster." Then he laughed and walked off. Later that evening, Sandra, Josie, Michaela, Gordon, Bill, and a few others came over to celebrate with me. It felt amazing to just enjoy myself for a change. Josie caught me by surprise when she invited me to dance. Pulling me close, she said with a grin, "Take a leap, Sandra. She's always cared about you. You'd be great together. And if not," she added playfully, "Michaela or I might snatch you up ourselves." She laughed, pretending I'd stepped on her foot as she limped away theatrically. Sandra was the last to leave. I told her, "Robert, I meant it when I said I'd be here if you needed anything. I still mean it. I only wish I had been the woman you needed back then. Michaela, Josie, any of us would have been happy to be a real part of your life. You're too good a man to go it alone. I've seen how you are around kids when they visit work. You'll make an incredible father someday. Go after the love you're searching for." I looked at Sandra and said, "Maybe we could help each other through this. I was too young back then. I didn't know myself, didn't understand how to be there for someone. But you meant the world to me. You were my first real love, not just a silly infatuation." Jim once told me I should speak to someone, maybe find a counselor to help me understand myself better. Maybe we could both try that. Talk to someone together, figure out what went wrong and what could go right. "I feel like there's this emptiness in me," I admitted. "I'm not sure who I am anymore." Sandra gave a small smile and said, "If we do this, Robert, it's because I want to be with you, as your partner, and maybe even the mother of your children one day. You're worth it." She took a breath and added, "Let's try seeing someone. Together." Just 2 days later, the local paper ran a front-page story, and there I was, featured prominently. The article didn't hold back. It laid out everything, showing clearly how there had been an attempt to frame me. There was no room for doubt. I came across as the innocent party. Online in the comments section, not a single person sided with her. Some of the things people were predicting would happen to her were honestly frightening. About 8 weeks after that, I got an email from Heather. Attached were copies of her letters addressed to the General Medical Council, the General Board of Nursing, and the leadership of Cary Evangelical Church. She didn't let Benning off the hook either. She held him fully accountable for disgracing his profession. She documented how he lied in court, how he broke confidentiality. She called for his license to be suspended without delay. It worked in his favor that, at his third court appearance, despite having repaid the more than $250,000 he swindled from multiple women, Sheriff Griffiths still sentenced him to 5 years in prison. Heather handed over photographs of Benning taken by Samantha Wiseman, along with her testimony, to the Crown prosecutor. The prosecutor ensured the defense team received copies before they even exited the courtroom on the first day of his plea. Benning admitted guilt at the earliest moment possible, earning a one-third reduction in his sentence. Sheriff Griffiths referred to a precedent upheld by the Court of Appeal. Although 5 years was the maximum he could impose, he believed the High Court would have handed down a sentence of 7.5 years. With the discount, he was justified in giving that full term. He had considered escalating the case to the High Court, where a harsher sentence might have been available and likely would have been handed down. But given the significant delays caused by the pandemic, he ruled against it. The message was clear: challenge the ruling at your own peril. Benning's name was already public record due to his role as a senior consultant in medicine, and the story made waves in several major national outlets. Sunday newspapers went especially hard, tearing his reputation apart. I was contacted for a statement, but I declined, explaining that the betrayal still felt too raw to comment meaningfully. Heather also sent a letter to the leadership of the Evangelical Church, questioning Carrie's fitness for her role and the legitimacy of any potential future promotion. She highlighted the fact that Carrie had lied under oath while swearing on the Bible, raising concerns about how her behavior reflected a repeated disregard for a commandment the church requires her to uphold. Carrie's standing within the church's hierarchy was now uncertain. I had serious doubts about the survival of her marriage. Her husband was deeply committed to spiritual principles. At the golf club, I found out Brian and Stephanie had split. Amy and Grant were finished too. Sarah and Mark were facing serious strains. Her closeness to the other couples had now triggered Mark's suspicions. At least my golf shots added another 15 yards whenever I imagined I was smashing the ball into one of the Bennings. As for Carol, I had nothing left to feel for her. She dragged me into utter emotional ruin, only to discover that her new hero was even worse. Poetic justice has a cruel sense of timing. Chapter 2. Sandra and I have now been in therapy for over 3 months, each of us seeing our own psychologist. It hasn't been easy, but we've managed to support each other, especially her helping me. Sandra sees Sharon, and while I often accompany her to the sessions, I usually only stay when we're exploring deeper reasons. Sandra opened up about how harsh her mother had been. Harsh might be too soft a word. I had been in a relationship with Sarah. When I was emotionally unraveling, Sandra would wrap her arms around me just to keep me together. We spoke at length about my marriage, about Carol, and how everything had left me emotionally scrambled. Sarah had pulled all that confusion out of me. She dismantled the emotional walls I had erected to keep the pain in check, and I resented her for that, for helping me face the hurt. She forced me to confront not just the betrayal itself, but the depth of my grief. I had been desperate to know why, what I had done to deserve it. What ultimately broke me wasn't just the deception. It was the realization that Carol was prepared to obliterate me without remorse. That version of her was a stranger. And worse, I no longer recognized myself either. Sarah reassured me. I hadn't done anything wrong. Still, the absence of answers made me turn all my rage inward. I had this fantasy. If I could just lay it all out, write everything like a mechanical breakdown, maybe I'd see the truth in black and white. That I had been caught in the schemes of 2 ruthless manipulators. That none of it had been my doing. I had played the honest man in their twisted game. Sandra backed Sharon's perspective completely. And ultimately, it was Sandra's insistence, her calm but unshakable encouragement, that led me to write this piece. She countered every objection I had until I had nothing left to hide behind. In the end, she promised me a reward if I went through with it. I reread everything multiple times, and it's clear now, I wasn't the one to blame. None of my friends could have imagined what Carol was secretly up to. To the outside world, we looked like the perfect couple. We hardly ever argued. Maybe I was naive to think she truly loved me, but I had no power to stop what they were plotting or eventually carried out. That's something I have to learn to accept. I know I shattered their plans far worse than they managed to wreck mine. I gave Sandra a call to say I was finished with it all. She said she'd be over soon. What kind of reward she had in mind, I wasn't sure. She's an incredible baker and had once teased me with her homemade scones. I'm a sucker for scones. We've been spending a lot of time in each other's company lately. At the movies, curled up together, or relaxing at her place. Any time we had, we made the most of it physically and emotionally. Our talks were always meaningful. We share a lot of the same interests, though there are a few we just humor each other on. Take golf, for instance. She finds it utterly pointless. She always jokes, "It's just a nice walk gone wrong." A few weeks ago, during a chat with Sharon, Sandra opened up about her love for children. Now she's hoping to get closer to some in her life. Sharon's been guiding her. Our last session confirmed that. And maybe there's a real chance they can build something together from it. Then came a knock at the door. When I answered it, Sandra stood there, visibly anxious. I welcomed her in and offered to take her coat. She gave me a look I'd never seen before. Tense, lips curled the way she does when under pressure, and honestly, frightened. Was she afraid of me? She exhaled deeply, gave a resigned shrug, and slowly slipped off her coat. Her eyes met mine. "I've been doing what Sharon told me to, preparing," she whispered, "but I'm still scared." I gently led her to the living room and took a seat beside her. "You don't have to go through with this, Sandra," I said softly. "I want to," she replied, her voice steady now. "This is the first step toward being something more for you. What else could I do?" So yes, we moved forward together. 2 weeks passed and everything shifted again. I was in a genuinely good place. I had landed a new position with a rival company to do charm. Better pay, better title. Neil Davidson, who interviewed me, seemed like a stand-up guy. Everything I'd heard about him was true. He had his own personal issues, so he understood what I'd been through. That didn't stop him from rigorously testing my engineering chops, though. Sandra and I were practically inseparable in the evenings. Just last weekend, I took her to Staffordshire to ride a roller coaster, her first ever. She screamed the whole way through, but ended up loving it. I'd booked a hotel room with twin beds, not wanting to push too far. When she walked in, she seemed lost in thought. She'd had 2 sessions with Sharon that week. I swept her into my arms and spun her around. I was just so overjoyed. Not just for the job, but for having her in my life. I told her that over and over as we danced. Later that day, I proposed. We raised our glasses and toasted. "To the future." She smiled and said, "We'll have plenty of time to talk through everything we want." But is there anything we should be thinking about now? I glanced around the room. Where will we live? You might not want to stay here considering the past. I'd live anywhere as long as it's with you, she replied. Sandra chuckled softly. I don't see a reason to leave this place. New houses feel like cramped rabbit holes. I used to visit here with you when you came to see your grandparents. You always said their love made this home feel magical. We'll build that same kind of life together, I said. The rooms are big, there's tons of space, and 4 bedrooms, she added. We could always install an additional bathroom. I'd probably tweak some of the color palettes, but nothing beyond that. The yard has more than enough space for the kids to run around safely. Maybe we could start a little garden, with vegetables, herbs, even a few fruit trees. I gave a silent nod. What about you? Are you already picturing your dream wedding? Sandra seemed caught off guard. I've never really imagined a big wedding for myself. If we did have one, it would be intimate. Just my mom, my sister, her husband, and kids. I've got a handful of close friends, maybe 4 or 5, and 2 of them would jokingly give me a hard time for taking you away. And you have your own circle, friends like Bill and Gordon, your brother, his wife, the kids. You rarely bring up your parents, and I understand that you felt deeply let down by them. Still, I sometimes wonder if our children will miss out on having grandparents who spoil them. My father passed away when I was young, and my mother's health is fragile. But she was an amazing mom. She'll be a loving grandmother too. Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you. In a low voice, I said, I'll take time to think about it.